My name is Pollander, and I am here to present my research on using pivotal response training district-wide to help students with autism spectrum disorder develop social communication skills. Students with autism spectrum disorder often display communication deficits, especially in social communication. As an educator, it is my responsibility to bridge that gap and teach my students ways to develop their social communication. Developing this social communication helps prevent students from feeling isolated and allow them access to their least restrictive environment. Most of my students have been in the self-contained classroom setting since they began school. This lack of exposure to general education and their peers has furthered the gap between their abilities to communicate in social settings as their peers. According to Bout, students with autism spectrum disorder are not used to responding with natural social cues, and they need to be taught. One way to teach students with autism spectrum disorder is through the use of the evidence-based practice pivotal response training, or PRT. PRT develops functional social communication in a natural way, such as a low-pressure setting on the playground or during unstructured playtime. PRT is essential in creating a conversational behavior. When I first started my research, I wanted to go all in and implement PRT district-wide. Use the cafeteria workers, the office staff, custodians, anybody that the student may come in contact with. But I quickly realized that implementing PRT district-wide would require a lot of upfront training and a lot of maintenance training after that in order to keep the fidelity of the practice. So after a little more research, I began to notice some people were using video training, which would be a solution for having to train a lot of people on using PRT with fidelity. However, the results of the research that showed video training were not as positive as I would have liked to seen. It still required a lot of maintenance training and a lot of monitoring those people using PRT. So I kind of backed off of that idea when I noticed peer-mediated PRT being successful. Peer-mediated PRT made a lot of sense to me. We are trying to teach these students with autism spectrum disorder ways to communicate with their peers using age-appropriate responses. So what better way than to put them in that social situation with a peer who is providing that PRT to them. PRT is not a new concept. However, peer-mediated PRT is fairly new. Research is beginning to show the use of a peer mediator increases that generalization of social communication skills from the classroom to outside situations, such as being able to go to the cafeteria and talking to the person in charge of taking the lunch money, beginning those conversations, teaching them how to start conversations and hold a conversation. The peer mediator also doubled as a person the student begins to build a relationship with, and further fostering that social communication. There were two different ways peer mediators were used. One was allowing an adult to still kind of be in the situation and use cue cards in the background, so the peer mediator didn't have to come up with the questions or keep that conversation flow on their own. They had cue cards to kind of help guide them. I feel like that would be a great place to start and build into the next step, which is training a peer to use PRT methods in order to keep those conversations going or start those conversations so that our responses begin to be more spontaneous and generalized in other situations. These research findings helped me understand the importance of using PRT, and not just for me, but for the peers, for the parents, and all stakeholders involved in the student with autism disorder's life. This research information easily can be implemented, and it is a huge piece that could largely shape the future of a student's life with autism spectrum disorder. It opens up the door to allowing them to communicate in many situations. As long as PRT is done with fidelity and is consistent, it can be a great benefit to students with autism spectrum disorder.